We are going to try to build Jobot, an AI, an artificial intelligence agent, and we are going to give it a bunch of different abilities. Starting with intelligence, where we are going to use GPT 3.5 or GPT 4 as the backend. Then we are also going to give it some skills where we are going to create some prompts, and you're going to learn a lot of tricks related to prompt engineering, which is one of the most desirable skills in 2023. Then we are going to give it the ability to hear, where it can understand human language, voice. We're also going to give it the ability to speak using the Neural to Voice API by Google. And all of this is going to be accessible via a web application. And it's also going to be accessible via a REST API. We're also going to give it some memory. So we are going to use embeddings. We're going to create embeddings from an existing piece of text and turn that into Jobot's memory. And we are also going to use databases to keep track of conversations that Jobot has had with its users. We're also going to give it some creative power, some ability to create images using DALL-E 2 and Stable Diffusion. And we are going to give it some vision capabilities. We are going to build the REST API, and we are going to use these APIs to then expose Jobot's functionalities to things like mobile applications, Discord bots, WhatsApp bots, Chrome extensions, and much more. So you should be taking this course if you want to learn how to build AI-powered applications and if you want to incorporate AI-powered features into existing applications. The reason we're doing this course is this paper called Sparks of Artificial General Intelligence, Early Experiments with GPT-4, which has discovered that a lot of intelligent properties have emerged within GPT-4. So when language models started out, they had just a few abilities, but as the number of parameters of these language models were increased, the number of abilities that emerged that they could understand became better and better, larger and larger. So one argument is that because of the amount of data and the amount of parameters we have set up, the neural circuits have been constructed where some of these large language models have some crazy abilities, and we'll try to explore all of these abilities over time. And that is also one of the reasons why we are not going to train any of our own models. We are going to use existing APIs, and we are going to use open source models wherever applicable. Now, you might disagree with this approach, but here is a tweet from Andre Karpathy, who is currently working at OpenAI and was previously the director of AI at Tesla. And he basically says that I'm still adjusting to the new world where gradient-based learning, which is training neural networks, is less common or desirable. Not all of us can train our neural networks because we simply don't have that amount of data or that amount of compute, GPU compute, to train them. And he writes in one of his previous blogs that in its most extreme extrapolation, you will not want to train any neural networks at all. In 2055, you will ask a huge neural net megabrain to perform some task by speaking or thinking to it in plain English. And we have almost gotten there with GPT-4 and some of the other exciting models. And if you ask nicely enough, it will oblige. And you could train a neural net too, but would you? Would you have to? And that is what we have done at Jovian. So we have developed Jobot at Jovian. And Jobot is a ChatGPT powered learning assistant that you can ask anything. For example, you can ask it, let me see, teach me how to find the largest element in an array in JavaScript, and you can hit send and it can help you out with that, just like ChatGPT. But here is the more interesting thing with Jobot. Now, we've also given Jobot a bunch of different skills or a bunch of different abilities. For example, Jobot can become a quiz master for you, where you can go into the quiz master skill and you can type which topic you want to be tested on. Let's say you want to be tested on machine learning. You can check that, ask the difficulty level of questions, and I'm going to set this to medium, and you can hit start conversation, and we use a prompt template. So we do some prompt engineering to generate questions for you. So let's say now I'm answering this question with B, and it's going to say that is the wrong answer, and it asks me to try again. So let me this time answer B. I think random forest is correct. So it's going to then, if it's the wrong answer, it asks me to try again. If it's the correct answer, it asks me another question. And you can see the implications of this, that you can auto-generate questions for practice for any topic of your choice. Another example I want to show you is this mock interviewer, where you can just type a job role that you're interviewing for. Let's say I'm interviewing for a data analyst role, and hit start conversation. And Jobot is going to ask you questions, and we can also expand this so that you can paste in the job description, you can paste in your resume, and it can give you some more detailed questions. So it says introduce yourself, so you can say I am an AI developer and I hold a CS degree. Okay, and of course, you can imagine that here we can incorporate the Whisper API so that we can actually speak into this application and Jobot can reply as an interviewer. So yeah, then it says, can you tell me a bit about data analysis? It's asking all the right questions, and you can try out this mock interviewer as well. So just go to jovian.com/jobot to try it out. Now in this course, you're going to learn how to build such applications using the APIs that are available to us, using the language, using the models that have all of these emergent capabilities. And this is a completely new paradigm, and this is probably going to be one of the most exciting areas of development over the next couple of years. So I hope that excites you. And with that, let's get into episode 1, first contact with Jobot. The course page is how to build an AI.com. So if you just point your browser to how to build an AI.com, that should bring you to this page, and you can enroll on this course page if you haven't enrolled already. And all the code, etc. links are provided here, so you can check out all these things as well. And there are some prerequisites for this course. You need to know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React.js, because those are the skills that are used to build web applications and APIs today. But basic knowledge of these is sufficient. And I'll also point to some beginner-friendly resources that can help you get up to speed in just a couple of hours or maybe a couple of days. So let's open up episode 1, first contact with Jobot. On this course lesson page, you will be able to watch the video recording, what you're watching right now. And there is a detailed notebook with the notes of all the topics that we are covering today. So I have this notebook here open on my computer, zoomed in a little bit. And today, the topic for today is first contact with Jobot. And today we are going to focus on building the basic intelligence of Jobot, which is going to be powered by GPT 3.5 or GPT-4. And we are going to be building a basic web application so that we can interact with Jobot. Okay, and this is going to look very similar to ChatGPT for now, but the idea is that we get to control the interface and we can add a lot more features like skills, hearing, memory, creativity, etc. Okay, and here are the topics we'll cover. We'll understand what it takes to build an AI-powered application. We will create a chatbot UI similar to ChatGPT. We will connect this chatbot UI to the OpenAI API and stream messages. And we will deploy this chatbot UI to the cloud using GitHub and Vercel. So this is what the user interface will look like. So this is sort of the browser screen. This is a wireframe. So we'll have a navigation bar where we'll have a title Jobot and an input box where we need to enter our OpenAI API key, which we'll talk about shortly. Then there will be a chat history right over here. So you can check it out here. So you have asked hi, who are you? And Jobot has replied, hi there, I am Jobot, a helpful assistant developed by Jovian. And you say, how do you print hello world in JavaScript? And Jobot says you can use the following code for it. And there is a chat box at the bottom where you can type a message to continue the conversation. So just how to build a message history and a chat box. That is what we're going to look at today. Really simple, because we're covering the basics. We're understanding how to use these tools and how to put these things together. Okay, so an input box where a user can enter a message. New messages from the user are sent to the OpenAI ChatGPT API. The response and the conversation history is shown above the input box, and the user can provide their OpenAI API key in a secure input box in the page header. Okay. Now, in the next lesson, we'll actually add user login so that people don't have to put in their own API keys, but we'll get to that with time. And these are some skills that you need to have. And if you do not have these skills, check out, there are links to beginner-friendly resources at the bottom of this notebook as well as throughout the notebook. So check those out. And one tip is to try to learn just enough so that you can understand and build on top of the code in this tutorial, and feel free to use ChatGPT or Jobot for help. So you can always go to jovian.com/Jobot, and there's a code explainer. So you can just pull some code from this lesson and paste it here. For example, mention the language, which will always be JavaScript because that's the language we're using. And let's say you have some code that you want to get an explanation on. Just click start conversation and it is going to provide an overview or explanation of the code. Okay, so use these tools to learn faster, to just learn on the go. All right, and the code for the tutorial and the source code and all are linked from here as well. Now let's get to the project setup. We will use GitHub for hosting our project and GitHub code spaces for development. So here's a quick tutorial on Git and GitHub that you can learn in half an hour to 45 minutes in case you don't know the basics already. But the first step here is to create a project repository. So we need to create a new project repository. So I'm just going to go in here, go to github.com. And on github.com, I'm just going to click the new button so that I can create a new repository. And let me zoom in here a bit. And I'm going to put it under the Jovian organization, but you can also just create it in your own account. Okay. And I'm going to call this repository Jobot. So Jovian HQ/Jobot is going to be the repository link. And let's see, an AI developed by Jovian using cutting edge ML APIs and models. Okay. I'm going to make it public. So we're actually going to build this entire thing open source so that you can build on top of it as well. I'm going to add a README file here. I'm going to add a git ignore file. So here I'm just going to select Node.js and I'm going to add an MIT license so that you can do whatever you want with this. Okay. So that is the basic setup here. Now, in case you don't know what these mean, I have included links in the notebook that you can check out. So let's create that repository. And with that, we are more or less ready to start coding. So now we have this repository, Jovian, github.com/jovianhq/jobot. I'm just going to drop that in the chat over here for you. And by the way, if you have any questions at any point, please post a discussion on the lesson page or post in the chat and we'll answer them. And now we need a way to actually run this code. So let us find out how we can run this code. Now we have created a project repository already. These are all the steps we followed. And in case you want to learn more about readme.md, git ignore, license, etc., you can do that. So we are going to run this code not on our computer, but using some cloud compute on GitHub. So we're going to use a GitHub Codespaces machine to run it. And this is basically a machine on the cloud that GitHub gives you then there is some free usage there as well, about 120 hours. So you can just use that to code online for free. So click on code, select Codespaces and click create Codespace on main. Okay. And when you click that, GitHub is going to set up a machine for you on the cloud. It is going to pull the GitHub repository that we just created onto that machine. Then it is going to open up a Visual Studio Code, which is the code editor that most developers use. And it is going to give you this browser-based interface to write code. So you can do all your coding from the browser. You don't have to install anything. And the machine on the cloud that is connected from this browser contains all the libraries that we need already pre-installed. Okay, everything is well set up for us. So let me just change the theme here so that you can see things a little more clearly. So I am going to go in here into the settings. So I'm going to click on the menu file. I'm going to go preferences, theme, color theme, and let me change the color theme over here to GitHub Lite so that you can see things a little better. And let me zoom in here a little bit as well. All right, so now we have GitHub Codespaces. You can see that the README file that we had created is present here. The git ignore file is present. The license file is present. But of course, we want to create a web application. So that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so these are the steps for creating a code space. And there are 120 hours of free usage that you get on personal accounts. And you can create up to 2 code spaces. So in case you're not able to create a code space, just go to github.com/codespaces. and delete any older code spaces that you have. So you can delete some of the older code spaces so that you can create a new code space on the repository that we just created. Okay. And you can learn more here about GitHub Codespaces. Now, by the way, please feel free to hit like and maybe also just share this video in case you find it interesting so far, just so that we can reach more people and continue making this series. Now, let's talk about creating our project. So we are going to use Next.js to create our project. So Next.js is a popular React framework for building server-rendered applications, static websites, and APIs. So it's a full stack JavaScript framework that uses the React JavaScript library, which is what possibly 90% of websites made in the last 5 years are using. Don't quote me on that, but Next.js and React are both insanely popular, and the easiest way to create a Next.js project is using the Create Next App command line tool, which sets up a fully functional customizable template with minimal effort. So here's what we need to do. We first need to run this command npx create next app followed by the name of the project that we want to create. We want to run this in a terminal. So in a command line terminal, Now in GitHub code spaces, the way you can open a terminal is by going to the menu, then selecting view and selecting terminal. And now once a terminal is created, so you can see here, now we have this bash terminal. So let me just do reset here so that you can see the terminal content. Let me just zoom that in one more step. Okay, now this is fine. All right, so now on this terminal window, we type or we paste in npx create next app, and now we want to give the project a name. So let me call this Jobot web, because this is going to be the web app as well as the API, but this is going to be one of the interfaces through which we are going to interact with Jobot. So now it's going to create, it's going to say that it's installing the package create next app, and now it's asking us, do you want to use TypeScript with this project? Well, to keep things simple for now, I'm going to say no, not use TypeScript. Would you like to use ESLint with this project? Now, ESLint is a very useful tool that can help us detect errors as we are coding, syntax errors, etc. And I make a lot of errors while coding, so I'm going to click yes. Would you like to use Tailwind CSS with this project? So Tailwind CSS is a CSS library that makes it very easy to create custom styles without writing any CSS files right within our HTML. So I'm going to use Tailwind CSS. And would you like to use the SRC directory? So this is just a good convention to put all the application code within an SRC directory. So I'm going to click yes. Would you like to use the experimental app directory? Probably not for now. Maybe at some point, but no, we want to stick with whatever is the basic setup. And finally, import alias, I'm just going to click enter here. I'm not too concerned with all of that right now. Okay, so you want to use these settings, but feel free to use TypeScript if you know it. Feel free to maybe use the app directory, the experimental features if you want to, but just to keep things simple as we're getting started, let's just go ahead with the basic setup that this is going to give us. So this is going to now install a bunch of libraries. It's going to install Next.js, React, etc., etc. And it is going to create a folder here. You can see that now a folder is created, Jobot web. And in this folder is all the code for our web application. And this is a good thing because in the root of our repository, we can then create maybe a Jobot Discord, Jobot WhatsApp, Jobot Android, etc. kind of folders. Okay. All right. So now looks like the project has been created, and now we can enter the folder cd Jobot web. And as I enter the folder, Jobot web, you will be able to see that there are a bunch of files and folders present here. Now we can run a development server. So before we even look at the code, we're going to see what this default template looks like. So if you just type npm run dev, that is going to start the development server, and it's going to start the development server locally on that cloud machine that GitHub Codespaces has given us. But we get this helpful pop-up here saying that we can actually access the development server running on that machine through our browser as well. And this is what the page looks like. Okay, so this is what we have right now. This is the application that has been created. So it has this, and it says that you can get started by editing src pages/index.js, and it has a bunch of user interface that we can remove. And all of this code is present inside the Jobot web folder. All right. So that's what we've done so far. We have created the next application, then we have started the setup, and then now we can browse the src folder. So the src folder in turn contains all the code, and the src folder contains a pages folder, which is where every page of the application is going to be present. It contains a styles folder inside which all the styles of the application are going to be present, all the CSS. Then it contains a public folder. Well, that's actually outside src. So you can see here that there is this public folder. This is where you can put images, etc., things that you need to serve directly without actually running it through some kind of parsing or bundling. And finally, it contains a package.json file. So the project folder contains this package.json file. This is where all the new libraries that we are going to install are going to show up. So you can see here that we have a bunch of things here already. That is what Create Next App added for us. But as we install new libraries, which we'll need to, they will get added here as well. Okay, so that is the basic Next.js project setup. Now let us clean up some of the code. Let us start afresh so that we don't have to work with the existing code. So first, let's open up src pages index.js. So if I just open src pages index.js, this is where, and I'm going to close the terminal for now. The server is still going to keep running. I've just closed the terminal. So this is where all our application code is present for the basic page. The index simply means the default page that shows up when we try to access the application. you can see here there's something about learn about Next.js. There is something about, let's see, learn about Next.js is written here. Now what happens if I just get rid of all this code? Let me just get rid of all of this HTML. So this is HTML and CSS that is written within JavaScript. This is how React works in case you're new to React. But don't worry, I'll point you to a quick tutorial on this as well. So now let's just create a div here, and inside the div, let's just put in the text hello world, and let us get rid of this. Let's get rid of all of these imports as well. I don't think we need any of these. Okay, so now if you see here, if you just look closely, if I just zoom in for you here, you can see that we have this word hello world over here. All right, and let's zoom this in as well. So we are just saying hello world here, and that hello world is rendered here, but there seems to be some kind of a background here. So I'm just going to go in also into styles. So inside the Jobot web folder, inside the SRC folder, there is the styles folder, and I can see that there are a bunch of styles here. So I'm going to get rid of all the styles except these first 3 lines, which is going to simply incorporate some Tailwind CSS base styles so that we can use Tailwind CSS properly. Okay. All right. So now we have the text here. So we have Jobot web. This is the application. And inside this, we have put in this hello world text, and that is getting shown here as well. Looking good. Our project setup seems to be going fine. Okay, next up, we have cleaned up in all the temporary styles as well, and we've just retained the base styles. Now, one other thing we need to do to use ESLint properly. ESLint sometimes leads to an error. So ESLint is what tells us if we try to do x plus 1, and x is not already defined. ESLint is going to show like these squiggly red lines over here to tell us that what we are coding is improper, is not going to execute properly. So to configure ESLint properly, we need to inform it about the working directory of the Next.js project. Okay, because the Next.js project is not the root directory of the repository, so that's where ESLint needs to be configured slightly specially. And here is how we can configure it. So I'm just going to say go into file, go into preferences. So file preferences, and in preferences I'm going to go into settings. So go into the file menu, preferences, settings, and then here I'm going to the workspace settings, because then these settings will get saved along with the repository. And in the workspace settings, I'm going to just search for ESLint. Okay, let's maybe search. Yeah, in the workspace settings, I am going to search for ESLint. Okay, no settings here. Well, let's see. Okay, looks like we don't have the ESLint extension as well. So let me just install the ESLint extension. Yeah, so we have this ESLint extension. This is the ESLint is what is the tool that is going to, yeah, it's enabled now. So now under settings, let me search for ESLint. Okay, now we have some ESLint settings, and I want to just inform it about the working directory. So ESLint working directories, and looks like I just have to edit that in settings.json. So I want to add the Jobot web directory as the working directory for ESLint, and that's going to get added in this top level .vs code folder where there are some settings. Okay, now don't worry if this part doesn't make sense. All we are doing here is making sure that some of the nice things that ESLint gives us work properly. So that's one thing. Inside settings.json, we just set the working directory for ESLint. And inside ESLint rc.json, I'm also going to pull in some recommended settings from ESLint, apart from the settings that are already present. Okay. So again, don't worry about this. You can just copy paste this if you are working on your own project. But now the benefit is I can just do something like this, x plus 1, and it's going to give me an error that x is not defined. Okay, and that's going to just make our coding a lot easier. That's why I wanted to go through this additional step of just making sure that we are setting up ESLint properly. Okay, so now at this point we have done the basic project setup, and whenever we are done with some setup, what we can do is we can stage all the changes that we've made. So we have a bunch of changes we've made. Let us stage all of them, and then let us just say basic project setup, and let us commit these changes. So now we are creating a git commit, and finally let us push these changes back to the GitHub repository. So the change where we've created the Next.js project, cleared out all the code, and we have added some ESLint settings. And now all of that is going to reflect here in our repository Jobot web. Okay, so now we have everything that we need. and we are ready to move forward. Okay, so this is a good idea to just commit your changes, and you can do that from this Git toolbar in the sidebar. So commit your changes and push them from time to time. Typically, once an application is deployed to production, you might want to use a branch as well. That's something we'll do the next time. But with that, our project setup is complete. So I would encourage you to go ahead and maybe try to learn the basics of React.js and Next.js in case you don't have them, in case you don't know them already. So you can spend 30 minutes learning basic React.js, 30 minutes learning basics of Next.js, and then you can keep learning as you go. The idea is to just learn just enough so that you can understand what we are doing in these tutorials and build on top of it. Okay. All right, so now the next step is for us to start integrating with ChatGPT. Now, what we want to do here is we want to impart some intelligence to Jobot. Jobot doesn't even exist right now, but we want to impart some intelligence, and that intelligence is going to come from ChatGPT, the ChatGPT or GPT 3.5, which is the model powering ChatGPT, or GPT-4 in the future. Right now, it's just a bit slow and a bit expensive, but that's where we're going to get this from. And we are going to then use this intelligence or interact with this intelligence of Jobot using the web application. All right. So ChatGPT powered by OpenAI is a large-scale language model. You probably know all about it. But ChatGPT also provides an API which allows a convenient way to integrate ChatGPT into your applications. And that is how we've built out all of these features on Jovian related to Jobot. Okay, so we are going to see how to leverage the ChatGPT API. Now, to use the ChatGPT API, you will need to sign up for an API key from OpenAI. So you'll need to go to platform.openai.com/signup. And once you sign up, you will then be able to log in. And here, once you are logged in, you can either create an organization or you can just use a personal account. So once you're logged in, you can go into your organization or personal account and you can go into view API keys. And over here, you need to create a new secret API key. Okay, so you need to click this button, and that's going to show you a pop-up. And once it shows you that pop-up, you need to give it a name. And once you create that key, the key will be shown on the screen. That's why I'm not going to do this right now. You need to copy that key and save it somewhere, because OpenAI is not going to save that key for you. You need to keep that key safe somewhere, and you need to use that key whenever you're sending in a request to OpenAI. So here you can see the names of the keys you've created, and you can see maybe the last 4 characters just so that you can cross verify and when it was created and when it was last used. And let's say for some reason your key has been compromised. Let's say you just showed it publicly, then you can just delete the key and make sure that nobody else gets access to it. Okay. OpenAI also will try to revoke keys that are leaked publicly, but they have scrapers and jobs to set it up. All right. So the idea is create a secret key, name it properly, save the actual key that shows up. It's about 64 characters or something. Save it somewhere securely. I have it here on a second screen, which I'm not going to show you, obviously. And that key is going to be used to connect with the ChatGPT API. Okay, so that's the first step. Really simple. Just sign up on platform.openai.com and go ahead. Now, one thing you will also have to do is you will have to go into billing and you will have to provide a payment method. OpenAI gives you some credits. They give you about $18 in credits for experimentation, but your phone number has to be verified and you need to have a proper payment method or a credit card on file. And you can set a usage limit so that you never actually get charged, but they require you to verify your credit card to actually use the API. Okay, so keep that in mind. Make sure that you've added a proper payment method. Otherwise, your key will not work. You're simply going to get an error that your key is invalid or it does not have the ability to actually send messages. Okay, so I've set all that up. I have my key sitting here on a second desktop, so I have nothing to worry about there. All right, now to use the ChatGPT API, we've created a key, and make sure one important thing to keep in mind is you never share your key publicly and never add it directly into your code. There are various ways to incorporate keys within applications using environment variables, etc. But we are not going to add it directly into the code. Okay. So to begin, let's just create a nav bar, a simple navigation bar at the top of the page with an input box where we can securely enter the API key so that we are entering the API key only within the application and never actually in our code. And to do that, we're going to add some code into pages/index.js. So the first thing we are going to do is clean this up, and we're going to create a state variable where this API key is going to be stored. Okay. So to create a state variable, and a state variable is simply like a piece of information that you want to hold and possibly change in React. So this is how you create a state variable. You say use state and you give it an initial value. So use state returns two things. It returns a variable and then it returns a function to set the value of that variable. And we might want to set the value of the variable when a button is clicked or when somebody pastes something into an input, etc. Okay, so we have API key and set API key. And now let's create a simple navigation bar. So we are going to, well, let's just first, so let's just first create a div over here. Let's create a div, and in this, there's nothing in this div right now. So yeah, nothing for us to look at. But let's now start putting some information within this div. So let's just say hello world again. And now we have this div and it says hello world. Now I want this div to look like a navigation bar. Well, actually I want this div, outer div, to be a container. So I'm just going to use some Tailwind classes. Now Tailwind CSS provides several utility classes so that you do not have to write CSS in a separate CSS file. Rather, you can simply use some utility classes. So I'm going to create this class or this outer div, this container of the page. I'm going to give it a display flex. And I'm going to say flex call. So I'm using the CSS flex box layout here. Again, tutorials are linked in the description. And I am going to then give it, I think this is it. So display flex, and I'm also going to give it the height of the screen. So edge screen. Let me give it that as well. Let me see if I can install the Tailwind CSS extension. Okay, so there is the Tailwind CSS extension. What this is going to do is just give me a bunch of hints every now and then when I am typing so that I can actually see a description of the code that I'm typing. Okay, so I'm going to say flex call edge screen. So I want its height to match the height of the screen. So that's good. And you can see what edge screen does, edge screen. Okay, now, so far so good. Let us now create the navigation bar. So I'm going to say div and I'm going to give it a class name. Let me actually use the nav tag here and nav so that we're using some semantic text here. And let us give it a shadow so that we have a shadow below the navigation bar. Let us give it a padding of 4 units. That's about 16 pixels. So there you see right at the top over here, if you see carefully, there's a navigation bar that has been added. And the small shadow has been added below it as well. And in this navigation bar, I want the Jovian logo or simply the Jobot logo. So I'm just going to type Jobot over here. All right. So now I have Jobot written here, and I also want an input. So let me create another div, and in this div, I'm going to put an input, and this input is going to have the type password. And this input is going to have, let's give it a class, let's give it a border. Let's give it a placeholder as well. Paste API key here. All right. Yep. So now these two things are showing up one below the other. I want to show them, I want them to show up side by side. So I'm just going to turn this into a flex row, the container around these. So once they're turned into a flex row, and let's just zoom out here and reload. Okay, not this. So the container for both of these, that's what needs to become a flex row. Okay, yeah. So now we have Jobot, and now we have this paste API key here. We have this thing here as well. So that's fine. However, I want to make this a little bigger. So let me just make this text a little bigger by giving it the class text XL. And let me also make it font bold. So this is big, nice and big. And let us just add space between. So let me just say justify content. All right, what is it? Justify between. Yeah, what this is going to do is just add space between these two. So the input goes here on the right and this stays here on the left. Let us just add some classes to the input just to make it look slightly nicer. So I'm going to say for this input, well, the type is password. That's fine. I'm going to just give it a padding. I'm going to make it rounded. All right, so now this looks slightly better. And maybe the padding that I want is just padding, a smaller padding. And let us also add over here item center. Okay, so these are all just CSS properties that we are applying using Tailwind CSS. And I'm just going to put in P1 over here. Okay, I think this is looking good. So now we have, all right, yep, probably px4, py2. Yeah, so these are all just various Tailwind classes, and you can see what this does. px4 simply adds padding left of 1 rem or 16 pixels and padding right of 1 rem or 16 pixels. So we've just applied a bunch of CSS properties without actually going into a CSS file. So that's fine. So now we have this navbar over here, and we have this paste API key here. We have this button over here, or this input box over here, and we can type paste our API key in here. Now what we need to do is we actually need to save the value of the API key in this API key variable. So that's where one thing we can do is we can say on change. We take the event that gets triggered when we change the value of the input field, and we want to set API key to e.target.value. Okay. So again, this is basically how you get the output of the input field. You say e.target, which is the input element itself, dot value, which is the value that has been entered inside it. And finally, the value that this input is going to show, that is going to be the value of the API key. Okay. So with that, we've made this input what's called a controlled component, that when we type something in here, you can see that that is going to get saved here. And if you want to verify that this is actually happening, we can just say console.log API key. Okay. And that is going to then print something in the browser console. Yeah. So let's now go in here. Let's click inspect. And let's open up the browser console right over here. And you can see that by default, the API key that is shown initially is empty. Oops. Yeah, the API key initially is empty, the value of the API key variable. But as soon as I type something, let's say I type A, you can see the API key now gets the value A. Or if I type hello, you can see the API key now gets the value hello. So what we are doing is we are simply taking the value from the input field and storing it in the variable API key and making sure the input field always shows the same value as well. Okay. Now, of course, you don't actually want this console log because this is where we are going to insert some sensitive information. So I am going to remove this console log, and now I can come and paste my OpenAI API key here. And that should be usable for us just by using the API key variable. Okay. So that's the first step. We have set up this input. We have set up this navbar. And now what we can do is we can add more. We can add some more logic here for showing a button. Some more logic for actually contacting the OpenAI API. And we can also add some more user interface, some more UI here to actually interact with the OpenAI API. Okay. Now to interact with the and by the way, in case you want to understand what this code does, you can always just copy this code, come into the code explainer on Jobot. So jovian.com/Jobot, and over here you can find the code explainer template. Just enter that this is JavaScript code, paste the code in here and start conversation. And this is going to give you an overview that this code defines a React component that renders a navigation bar with a password input field to get an API. It is just insane that this can understand React code and explain it to you step by step. And all you had to do is just paste the code, and we had to pre-prompt it in a certain way. And it also says there are no errors in the code. Okay, so that's great. Feel free to use this to your advantage when you're understanding things. Now, the next thing for us to do is to just understand the OpenAI API. So now we want to actually call the API, and specifically the API that we're going to use is called the chat completions API. So if you go on platform.openai.com and open the API reference section, and in the API reference section, go down to chat, because we want to create a chatbot kind of interface. So the chat API, given a chat conversation, the model returns a chat completion response. So if you give it an entire conversation, a history of messages, it is going to return the next message in the conversation to you. Okay. So we want to create a chat completion. And to do that, the API endpoint or the URL that we need to call is api.openai.com/v1/chat completions. So let me just put that in a variable here. So API URL equals that. So I'm just going to put that in a string variable here using const. Const is simply how you create variables in JavaScript. And then here's what it expects. So what it expects in the body, here is the request body. It expects a type of model and it expects a set of messages to be sent. Okay. Now here, of course, there is just one message. There is a single message and each message has a role, which means is this message in the history? Was this message sent by the user or was this message sent by the bot? So you can indicate that because you're going to send the entire history for context. And then it contains the content. This is the actual content of the message. So if you call this API /chat /completions and you call it using the post HTTP method. So that's an HTTP method that is used to call this API, and you call it with this request body, and you have to provide an authorization bearer token, which is going to be your OpenAI API key. So you construct a request where you're going to in the header, you are going to put in your API key. In the body of the request, you're going to put in this, which contains a message or a series of messages, and then you send it to this URL. That is going to then return a response, and this is what the response is going to look like. The response is also in the JSON format, and the response specifically has a bunch of information, but specifically has this section called choices. And in this choices section, you have the list of messages, and normally there is just one message that is returned. So yeah, you get the message, and from the message, you can see that the message has role assistant, which means it was returned by the bot, and the message has a certain content, and this is the content that we may then want to actually show on the screen. Okay, so there's other information as well, but basically we're just interested in the choices, and in the choices we are interested in the message where we have a role and content. Okay, so that is the API endpoint that we're going to use. This is the endpoint. The method is post. This is the request body. And it expects the OpenAI API key to be passed in the header. So authorization bearer, and this has to be replaced with the actual key. And then it returns a response message in this format, the format that you are seeing here. Okay, so I encourage you to just explore more about OpenAI's APIs here. You can also check out the documentation on the page that we just opened. And apart from this, you can also go ahead and check out a little more about React's use state hook, how we are managing state within this application, that API key variable. Again, it's a 10-minute tutorial, so you can check out on React's website. And if you want to learn the basics of Tailwind CSS, it's really simple to learn. Check out this YouTube tutorial as well. So all of these tutorials are under 30 minutes long, so it shouldn't take you more than a couple of days to get up to speed to understand the code that we are writing here. Okay. So now let's add a button below the nav bar to invoke the chat completions API. And we are then going to show the response from the chat completions API below the button. Okay, so let's do it. Let's see how we can do this. So I'm going to create another div inside which I'm going to put my button. I'm going to create a button over here. And in this button, I'm just going to say send request. Okay, and you can see that this button gets added here. Now maybe let's just give this div a little bit of a padding. So P4 maybe. Yeah. And now let's just give this button some styles. So into this button, I'm just going to put in a style. So let's put in the style. Let's give it a border. Let's make it rounded MD. So it's a nice round button. Okay. We should probably give some padding inside the button. So let's give P2 as the padding inside the button. Okay. Now the button is looking good. Can zoom in here a bit. Oops. Yeah, so you can see the button. Let's give it a blue color. So BG blue 500 is the blue color. Okay, all good. Then let us give this button BG blue 500 on hovering. Let me make this button a little darker. So BG blue 600 on hover. And you can see the ease of use of Tailwind, and you can almost guess what this does. Border is simply going to add a border width. Rounded class is simply going to add a rounded border, etc. Okay, let's maybe make the text white here. All right. Yep, we made the text white. So now this is the button. Okay, and we can add an on-click handler to the button. So we can come in here. Oops. Yeah, so now we can come in here and we can just say on-click, and on-click we can simply call a function called handle click. Now, of course, handle click is not defined. So let's just call it send request. Okay, so we need to define this send request function. So I can say function send request, and it takes nothing. I don't want to use anything. And for now, I'm just going to say console.log button clicked. Okay, So that's how you simply create a clickable button in React. You just create the button, give it some styles. You can use Tailwind. And now clicking the button, if I clear the console here, clicking the button just prints out button clicked. Okay. But of course, what we want to do is not just click a button. We actually want to call the OpenAI API over here. Now to call the OpenAI API, I'm going to use the fetch function, and I'm going to make this an async function because I'm going to use something called async await to just be a little nicer, just make my code look a little nicer. Again, tutorials to both of these are linked in the notebook. And I'm going to say const response, the API response is await fetch. Now we're going to fetch the API URL, but of course we need to give it some options as well. Now the first option we need to give it is the method. So the method for this API URL is going to be post. Okay, we have that. The next thing we need to do is we need to give it a bunch of headers. Okay, so I'm going to give it two headers. One header is called content type, and the header's value is going to be application/JSON. This is to indicate that the body of the request that I'm sending is going to be JSON. Then I need to provide the authorization header, and the authorization header is going to contain the word bearer followed by the API key. So plus API key. Okay, so this is how we send the API key securely in the header. And now we just need to provide the body, and the body has to be a string. So we need to say JSON.stringify. So we want to provide a JSON object, but we want to convert it into a string before sending it in the request. And in this body, I can remember here from the reference that I need to provide a model and I need to provide a message. So let me just include that. Okay, so the model that I want to use is okay, now I'm going to install one more extension over here just to make formatting my document a little easier. So I'm going to go into extensions and I'm going to install an extension called Prettier. Okay, let me just hit install on this extension. And that just installs the extension. And the benefit of this extension is as soon as I hit save, it is automatically going to nicely format all the code for me. But here's what I'm saying. I am saying that when the button is clicked, I want to call send request, which is going to fetch this API URL using the post method with these headers. And the API key is coming, of course, from this API key state variable. And I'm going to send the body. I'm going to use the model GPT 3.5 Turbo, which is the default model on ChatGPT. And I'm going to send a message, role user and content hello. And finally, I am going to so this is the response that we get. Now we want to get this response. We want to get this response passed in JSON format. So we can say response JSON equals response or await response.json. Okay, now why do we need this await here? Because we are making a network request. We do not want to block the main UI thread. We do not want to block. JavaScript is single threaded, and if you block the thread, you will not be able to perform any actions on the screen. So that's where we are simply going to use await, and that's going to just use some concurrency. It's going to do this fetch in the background, and only when the fetch is completed, the response is going to be set, but the main thread is not going to be blocked because of it. Okay, and now let us simply just log console.log response JSON as response JSON. Okay, so for now we are not showing this on the screen. We are simply going to log it on our console. So let's come back here and let us reload the page. Let us clear the console over here. And now if I just click the button send request, okay, so two things happen. One, we sent a post request, and you can actually check what post request has been sent. You can actually just check it simply by heading into the network tab. If you go into the network tab, and let me make this a little bigger, you see that we made a request to the completions API. We made a request to api.openai.com/v1/chat/completions, and there were a bunch of headers in here as well. Okay, and here is what we sent to that API. We sent messages where we had role user and content hello. And here is a response we got back. The response is you didn't provide an API key. You need to provide your API key in the authorization header using bearer auth. Okay, so I need to provide an API key, and that's what we have this for. And let me now try to send the request again. And let's see. And we get an error again. And this time it says incorrect API key provided. So again, the API key provided is incorrect. So we just need to provide the right API key. So at this point now, I'm going to grab my API key, the one that we created earlier, and I am going to just paste that in here very securely so that you don't get to see it. And now I'm going to click send request, and this time the request is going to be sent with the proper API key. Okay, so now let's send the request with the proper API key. So let's click send request. And voila, magically we now have the response JSON contains all of these things, and it's a JSON object, and the JSON object contains choices, and the choices contains this choices 0, and choices 0, it's an array, and this message contains hello there, how can I assist you today? So with that, we've made first contact with our assistant. Of course, it's not called Jobot just yet, but we can at least start sending some messages to it. All right, so let's now come back and let us set this into a state variable. So I'm going to create a new state variable called bot message. Okay, let's get the state variable bot message, and let's also create another state variable set bot message, and I'm going to say use state, and it's going to be empty by default. And all I'm going to do here is simply set bot message to response JSON dot choices 0 dot message dot content. Okay, so, and instead of logging the response JSON, let me just simply log bot message. All right, so let's just simply log bot message over here. And again, I'm just going to grab my API key, paste that in here, and click send request. Okay, nothing got pasted. Well, maybe we didn't set the right thing. Let's go into the network tab once again. Let us check the completions and let's check the response. The response is chat completion created at usage, etc. message. So the message has choices, and then under choices we have a message, and in the message we have content. Well, the bot message should have been set. It's fine. What we'll do is we'll simply display the bot message below the button. So let me just create a div, and in the div let us display the bot message. Okay, and let us just give this div some let's give it a margin top empty 4, and let's display the bot message in big text. And you can see here that the bot message has now been displayed. So hello there, how may I assist you today? Okay, so we are now at a very, very basic place right now, where when we click send request, what we do is we simply send this message, role user content hello. All right, and it says hello there, how may I assist you today? Now I can change the message here in my code. Instead of content, I can say hello, please introduce yourself. Okay, and let me now click send request again. And of course, it's still going to pick just this one message, and it says, hello, I'm an AI language model created by OpenAI. I'm designed to understand and respond to natural language input, etc., etc. Okay, so now, of course, we are talking to ChatGPT here, and it says exactly what it is. It's an AI language model created by OpenAI. Now, we might want to give this bot, this model, this API our own identity, and that is where OpenAI allows you to pass a special type of message called a system message. So the first message, or any message really, in your code can be a system message, and a system message can contain some instructions for your bot to always follow. Okay, so let us create a system message here, and let me just create a system message here outside, and we're just going to use that here. So const system message. Okay, now the system message is generally not shown to the user. It is just used behind the scenes. So let's see. You are Jobot, an AI created by Jovian using state-of-the-art ML models and APIs. Okay, and let's just call it a helpful and versatile AI. And we're going to pass that system message as the first message over here. So content system message. So now, and let me just reload the page here so that we can see this in action from scratch. So now when we click send request, two messages are going to be sent. The first is the system message with the content, you are Jobot, a helpful, versatile AI assistant. And second is the user message, which is a message for now, which is something we've hard coded. Please introduce yourself. So let me click send request. And in a second, you should get back a response. Hello, my name is Jobot and I am an AI created by Jovian. I'm designed to be helpful and versatile using state-of-the-art machine learning models and APIs to provide assistance on a wide range of topics. Whether you need help with a programming problem or want to learn about a new technology, okay, it's got its own personality already, or just need some general advice, I'm here to help. So just like that, we have taken that first step of imparting intelligence to Jobot and also an identity. So this actually identifies itself as Jobot. Right? And of course, we can give it some more information, and we are going to use system messages a lot in the next episode, where we're going to create a bunch of skills a couple of episodes later. And system messages are going to be very important because that is how you do prompt engineering for your chatbots. Okay. All right. So that concludes the second or the next portion, where we have now added a bunch of code. Basically, we've added this API URL, bot message, send request, etc. to send the request. And we've also added a system message so that the bot identifies itself as Jobot. And we've now set that bot message as well. And that bot message is then being shown on the screen as well. Okay. Again, there is a detailed explanation of the code that has been generated using the code explainer. So please use that. And then we added some code over here. So we added some code to create some UI elements as well. Okay. So we just created a button, and then we just created a div below the button to simply display the message. And we've started interacting with the ChatGPT API. How exciting is that? Okay. And this is what it looks like. And when you send request, depending on what message you've said and what system message you've said, you're going to get back a response. I can even check out maybe another response. So if I just say, what is JavaScript as the content message, and let me just send request. So then it is going to give me an introduction about JavaScript. And obviously, ideally what we want is we want to actually have an input box from where the user can type a message, and then a message history that is also sent. But you can see that Jobot is already useful for us. It is telling us information that we want to know. Okay, now a couple of exercises for you. Learn more about the fetch function here. This is the fetch function that we used over here in send request. And second, learn a little more about async and await in JavaScript, because they make it really easy to write some of this network code. And again, you can keep learning these things as you go, but the key idea is you're getting an intuitive sense of what we are doing and you're able to follow along. Okay, now let's go ahead and build that chat interface. So here is the wireframe that we were given in the problem statement. We have built out this navigation bar over here, Jobot and enter API key. And we have this, we don't have this message history just yet. So we need to build out this message history. And we also probably need to find a way where if Jobot returns some code, we want to render that code nicely formatted, which is not going to happen right now. And we need, of course, an input box and a send button to actually send the message across. Okay. We want to build this chat interface. So to begin, let us add the message history and chat input using this code. Okay. So I've updated the updated code is present here, but let's just build it out step by step. So first, I am going to get rid of this over here. So I'm going to get rid of all of this so that we are going to build out the message history from scratch. And let me go back into the console here and clear things up a bit as well. All right, now below the nav, let's create another div. This div is going to be our message history. So let's just add a comment here called message history. And then let's create another div. And let's also just put in the words message history here. And this is going to be the input box that we're going to put here. So let's see. Message input box. So by the way, I'm just creating these comments here in JSX or Java, which is HTML within JavaScript essentially. And the way I'm doing this is by pressing command / as a shortcut. And let's give this nav a title as well. Let's just call it navigation bar. Okay. All right. Now we have message history. We have an input box, but of course we want message history to take up the entire screen and we want the input box to come at the bottom. So that's where we can say class name equals flex1. So flex1 will simply make message history take up the entire space, and you can see that input box is shifted to the bottom. And let's also give it a maximum width. So you can see right now it takes up the entire width. We don't want that. So let's give it max w screen MD. So that way this is going to get a maximum width. And let's also then center it using MX Auto. So MX Auto is going to add equal margin on left and right so that this, you can now see that this is going to be centered on the screen. Yeah. And all right, well, let's also make it W full so that on smaller screen, it takes up the full width. All right, so here's what happens. On smaller screen, it takes up the full width. On bigger screen, it goes out, okay? And I'm actually going to just put all of this stuff in an inner div so that things are a little easier when you arrange things a bit more hierarchically. All right. So now we have this message history over here. And in this message history, we are going to add a bunch of, we're going to display a bunch of messages. Let's maybe create an input box now as well. So in the input box section, again, I'm going to give this some, let's create a div inside it, again with the maximum width, etc. So class name, W full, max W screen, MD. That's just a way to give it a maximum width that is matching a certain kind of screen size, MX Auto. Okay, so now we have this, and inside this we want to first put an input box. So let me say input, or let me use a text area. So text area, and in this text area, let me give this some classes. So let me give it a border. Let me give it text LG so that we have big text. Let me make it rounded MD so that it has a rounded border. Okay, so now we have this text area, and inside this text area we can actually type as well. Let me just add some padding here as well so that this text area looks slightly nicer. Let me actually give it, let me make this, let's add a button here. Okay, button. And for the button, again, let's give it a class name, and let's call this button send. And let's make this button blue. So BG blue 500, and on hover, I want to say BG blue 600. And let's make this button, let's give this button a border. And let's give this button, let's make it rounded. So rounded MD. All right, so now that's our button over here. Of course, the button can be better. So let's make it text white. Let's put text LG so that this button is bigger. And what we want to do is we want to make this input box take up this full width, and we want to put the button here in the corner. So I'm just going to turn this outer div into a flex container. So I'm just going to say flex over here, and I'm going to give this flex 1 so that it expands to take up all available space like that. And let's give this button, let's give maybe the number of rows. Let's set that for now to just 1. And let us give this button a width. So let's say W, let's say W20. So now it has a certain width. And let's also give this button some padding. So P2. Yeah. And let's give it some margin ML2. All right. Okay, now this is looking good. So now we have this text box. Now we have this button as well. And so we're going to type something, and then we hit send, and that is going to then go ahead and fix things. All right. So now let us maybe also add some padding on the left and right so that things are a little nicer when it's off screen. So let's add PX4, and let's add some padding at the bottom, PB4 as well. Okay. Now this is looking nice. Now we have a text box and we have a button, and I'm just going to use P1 here for now. Yeah. So now we have a text box and we have a button. And now what we want to do is we actually want to save the value that is being typed into this text box in a state variable. So I'm going to create a state variable over here. I'm going to create const user message. So I probably don't need bot message anymore, so I'll get rid of that. But I'll keep it for now. Const user message and set user message equals use state empty. And once again, the same thing that we did with the API key, we are going to say for the text area that its value is user message and its on change is e dot target handle user message, or let me just call this handle type. Okay, or handle typing. Okay, and I'm going to define this function handle typing over here. So I'm going to say function handle typing, and that is going to get an event E, and all it's going to do is it is going to simply set user message E dot target dot value. Okay, and just like that our user message will get updated. But apart from that, let's also do console.log E dot target dot value. Okay, and so we're just going to say typing, and this is what we're typing, and we set user message to E dot target dot value. Okay, so now if I clear the console over here once again and start typing, you can see that as I type, the text box gets updated, obviously, but you can also see that we are updating the state variable here. We are saying set user message as e.target.value, and we are also logging it. So you can see hi there is getting logged as well. So now whatever is the value within the text box, that is available to us within user message. Okay, so that's great. So now let us go in here and let me just go back and set this directly on the text area because I don't need the console log anymore. So I'm just going to say on change, take the event and just set user message as e.target.value directly as an anonymous function on the text area. Okay, let's get rid of handle typing. All right, the next step now is to actually maintain the message history and send that entire message history to Jobot, to our ChatGPT API. So I'm going to get rid of bot message. I think that is not required anymore. And I'm going to say const messages and set messages, or let me say message history and set message history, just to be very explicit. Use state empty list. So of course, this is going to be a list of messages, and by default, I want this to be the empty list. And here is what we want. First, we want to display the messages that are there. And I don't want, maybe not the empty list. Maybe let's keep just a simple system message over here. Okay, so I'm just going to put a system message over here. So let me just copy the system message and put that inside my message list. All right, so there is a system message by default, and I am going to now come in here into the message history and actually display the list of messages. Okay, how do we display the list of messages? Well, you need to use JavaScript map, so we can say message history dot map. And now we take the message and its index. So those two things are available to us in an anonymous function. And now we can just render a div, and we need to give this div a key. This is just how React works. Again, I will not go too deep into this, but we can render two things here. We can now render message.role, which is the role of the message, each message, and message.content. Okay, so you can see here that now we have a system. You are Jobot, a helpful and versatile assistant. So right now our message history contains just two things. Contains just one element, and that is the system message. And that system message says you are Jobot, a helpful and versatile assistant. Okay, let me just improve the styles here slightly. So I'm just going to say px4 over here, and I am going to just give each of these an empty 3. So just a top margin. I am going to use a larger text here, so text LG, so that this text is slightly larger, and I'm going to make this bold. So let me say font bold. All right, so now we have the message role, which is system, and now we have you are Jobot, a helpful and versatile AI. And by the way, if we had multiple messages, and we can do that simply by adding multiple messages here, you can see that multiple messages would show up here properly as well. So if I had the second message here, for example, from the user, then we would have this second message as well. Okay, in this case, the user has the message. Yeah, the user message is what is JavaScript, the system message is such and such. So far nothing has been typed. This is just the default that we are starting out with. Okay, and the reason all the messages are rendered is because we are doing .map. We are looping over the messages and printing out each message one by one using a div. So again, this is more JavaScript, JSX, React code that I will encourage you to check out the tutorials for. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to take this message history add to it the new message that was typed here. When the send button is clicked, send that entire new history to the API, and then from that API we get the response, which is going to be another new message, and add that back to the message history. Okay, so let's do all that step by step. So let me first of all remove this second message from the message history. So that's fine, and I'm going to say button on click, and I'm going to just simply call send request again from this button. And of course, I need to update my send request because this is going to set bot message and all that. So what's the first thing we need to do? The first thing we need to do is update the message history. All right. So let's for a moment, let us just comment out all this code because we're not going to do that. Let us just update the message history. How do we do that? Well, we have the current set of messages, which is the message history. Now what we can do is we can first say the new message, and the new message that needs to be added to the message history is, well, it has the role user because this is being sent from the user, and it has the content. Well, what is the content? The content is simply user message. Okay. So we've created a new message. Now we need to create a new array. So const new message history. Okay. Const new message history, and here I am going to say that I want to first get all the existing messages, which is by saying ... message history. So that gives me the existing message history that is coming from the state variable. By default, it will just have the system message, and then I want to add to it the new message. Okay, so now this is my new message history, and now I want to say set message history to new message history. Okay. All right. So let's just do that for now. So now what happens is, let's say if I say teach me JavaScript, and if I click send, you can see that got added to the message history, but it did not get cleared from here. So I can keep clicking send, and it keeps adding the same message. So the other thing we may also want to do is we may want to set user message to the empty string. Okay. So now if I reload the page and I say teach me JavaScript and I click send, the user message got added, and now this got cleared. We're not hitting the API yet, but now you can see, hey, where please teach. And again, it doesn't do anything. Doesn't do anything just yet. Okay, so this was just updating the React state variable, adding the message to it. Now let's go ahead and let's actually make that request. So again, we're just going to do this very carefully. So we say response is await fetch API URL. API URL remains the same. The method is post. The headers are content type application JSON, and of course we need the proper API key. The API key needs to be set properly. That's very important. And then we get back. We're going to get back JSON.stringify model GPT 3.5 turbo. And messages. Okay, now here the messages that we pass are not the messages that we hard coded, but the new message history. Okay, and just to simplify things a little bit, let me just call this messages. So let me just gonna rename this to messages and set messages. Okay, and yeah, let me just call this new messages. Otherwise things will get too long. Okay, so yeah, so messages and set messages is the history of messages that we have. And what we do is we create new messages where we take the history of messages, copy it over using ... add the new message to it, which comes from the user message with the role user. And now we are ready to send this new set of messages to the API. And once we get back the response from the API, we can then, let's just for now print the response. So console.log response JSON. We convert it to JSON, so response JSON is something that we can print out. So let's just do this much right now. Let's get the response JSON out, and I'm going to grab my API key in here again and paste it here at the top. So remember, whenever you're doing this, you need to paste your API key multiple times sometimes. And now I'm going to clear the console, and I'm just going to say, what is JavaScript? Or maybe something even shorter. How are you doing today? Okay, let me click send. So the user message is sent, and now we make the API request as well, and now we get back this response JSON. So you can see that we have this response JSON, and in this response JSON there is a choice, and in the choice there is a message, and the message is of the role assistant, and it says, as an AI, I don't have feelings that are like humans, but I'm functioning properly and ready to assist you with any request. How may I help you today? Great. So now we just need to grab this message and create the bot message and add it. Okay. So let's say const new bot message equals. So we have response dot choices 0. That is the message. So response JSON dot choices 0 dot message. And that is going to contain the role, that is going to contain that content as well. You can see it contains both the role and the content. And then we can say const new messages 2 is going to be dot 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 new messages, which is the messages that we had from the user. And let's add to it the new bot message. And we're going to just set that. So set messages, which is the message history that we are showing, to new messages 2. All right. And with that, I think we are more or less set. So now if I go in here and again clear things, and now I'm just going to reload this page once again, just so that things are clear. Okay, so we have a system message first by default, and then we are going to type a message. So how are you doing today? Let's capitalize that properly. That message, when we type it, it is going to get added to this array called new messages. We are going to set the message history to new messages, and we are also going to send this message history, the new message history, to the API. Then we are going to get the response. From the response, we are going to get the bots message, and then we are going to get that bots message and add it to our message history once again. Okay, so let's click OK, send, and now the API request is being sent. And if we have done things right, you can see now we have the assistant response. As an AI, I don't have feelings in the same way humans do, but I'm functioning perfectly fine and ready to assist you with any queries or tasks that you have. How may I assist you today? Perfect. So we are good to go now. Everything is looking set. And I think what we can do is we can just maybe hide the system message, and instead of user, we can just say you, and instead of assistant, we can just say Jobot. So I'm going to make a couple of changes here. I'm going to say messages.filter, and here I'm going to say show a message only if the message.role is not equal to system. Okay, again, more JavaScript, but the basic idea here is we do not show system messages to the user. And then when we are showing the message role, instead of showing the message role directly, what we can do is we can check the value of message role. So if the value of the message role is user, then we show you, otherwise we show, and this is the JavaScript ternary operator. Again, some JavaScript syntax, something that you can just copy over, ask the code explainer and figure out you, and otherwise we can say Jobot. And that's it. So now you see here, we can again paste our API key in here, and I'm going to say, hey there, who are you? And when I hit send, the message gets sent and it says you said who are you? And then Jobot is going to reply, hello, I'm Jobot, a versatile AI created by Jovian using state-of-the-art models, etc., etc. So with that, we have implemented the basic chat interface that we set out to implement, more or less. There is still more to do. We have not deployed it. There are some more formatting things we can do, but that is what the code looks like. So we have used about 95 lines of code. That's not a lot. And specifically, a lot of these code lines are just a single div or a single input. And of course, some of these are split across multiple lines. So it's very little actual code that it took us to connect to the OpenAI API and create a chatbot window for us, right? So that's great. Now let's keep moving forward, and as an exercise, generate explanations for various parts of the code using the code explainer template. So just to give you an example, let's say you just want to explore this piece of code. What exactly is this doing? So you can just come and paste that code in here. You can just say JavaScript and start conversation, and it's going to explain that this code filters out some system messages and displays the remaining message, and such is the explanation line by line. It's just great. You have so many great tools at your disposal now. All right. Now, the next thing we need to do is add support for showing code over here. So let's say I ask, how do you print hello world in JavaScript? and JavaScript. Let's fix that. And let's wait for the response and let's see what exactly it comes out as. Now you can see here it says to print hello world in JavaScript, you can use the console.log method. Here's an example, JavaScript console.log, etc., etc. This will print. Okay. Now clearly this is not formatted properly. You can see that there is these three quotes and then it says JavaScript, then it says console.log. Not easy to see. So this is the ChatGPT API returns responses in a format called Markdown. And we can render Markdown properly using the Tailwind CSS typography plugin and the React Markdown library. So let's explore the Tailwind CSS typography plugin. The typography plugin allows you to add some default nice typography styles to any HTML, random HTML content, specifically HTML rendered from Markdown or pulled down from a content management system. And then the React Markdown library actually allows you to convert some Markdown into proper HTML tags that can then be styled by the Tailwind typography plugin. Okay, so that's what we need to do. And we use it by using the pros class, but we first need to install this plugin. So I'm just going to go in and install this plugin. So let me come in here and let me open up the terminal once again. So let me say file view, or let me say view terminal. And over here, let us just create a new terminal window. And in this new terminal window, I'm going to enter the Jobot web folder. All our dependencies have to be installed in the Next.js project. So keep that in mind, otherwise you'll run into issues. And I'm going to say npm install. Let's just paste Tailwind CSS / typography. So that is one package we are installing. The other package we are installing is React Markdown. Okay, and let's click enter. And that is going to install these, and it is also going to add these to our package.json file. So you can see now that we have, okay, it's going to take a while to actually install the packages, but the packages are going to get added in the dependencies section of our package.json file. Okay, you can see here now we have the Tailwind CSS typography plugin, and we have the React Markdown library as well. Now the other thing we need to do is we need to update the tailwind.config.js file to actually use this plugin. So I'm going to come back in. I'm going to come into the tailwind.config.js file in my project. And here I'm going to come into plugins and just paste require Tailwind CSS / typography. Okay, we are almost there. The next step is to actually use the pros class, but of course we also need to render this Markdown properly, and that's where we're going to use the React Markdown. So let's use the React Markdown code here. Okay, so how do we do that? Let's come back into index.html. Let us close this terminal now, and let's say import React Markdown from the React Markdown library. Okay, and now take this imported React Markdown component and simply put our message body or message content inside this imported React Markdown component. So let's just say React Markdown and move this to wrap the message body, and let's add the pros class over here. Okay, and just like that, you see how beautiful this looks now. To print hello world in JavaScript, you can use console.log, and here is an example, console.log JavaScript. This will print the hello world to the console when you run your JavaScript code. This is looking great, fantastic. Okay, one last thing I want to do is I want this navbar to always stay, and I also want this text box to stay. I just want the message history to scroll. So I'm just going to do one thing over here. I'm going to say that this outer div for the message history, it is, I'm going to add overflow y auto or overflow y scroll, so that all of this stays as it is, like you're seeing here. And this is just going behind the navbar and it is going below the text box. Okay, so that makes it look slightly nicer, more like a message history box. So again, now we can go in here and now we can paste our API key in here, and let's say, hey, who are you? And we might also want to add support for enter to send, but yeah, let's say who are you, and then that is going to come up with the response. And then teach me the very basics of JavaScript. Okay, I'm going to click send, and it is going to come back with a response. It's going to take a while because it's going to be a longer response. We're going to talk about how to show the response character by character as well. But now as soon as it has come back with the response, that response is going to show up here, and we are going to be able to scroll this UI as well. Now, while it does that, let me go in and actually commit this code. So let's see, added the chat box UI and open AI API. and let me hit commit, and that is going to stage the changes, commit them, and now it is going to upload those to the cloud. You can see here, sure, I'd be happy to teach you JavaScript, a high-level programming language for creating dynamic websites. Here are some basic functions. Variables are such and such, data types are such and such, operators are such and such functions. Wow, this is a pretty detailed tutorial already, and I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any questions, and you can keep moving forward like that. Okay, so that is the basic setup. Let me just add a little bit of padding here at the bottom as well, just to make it look slightly nicer. So instead of just MT3, let me make it MY3, just so that there is some more padding here at the bottom as well. And let me commit that as well. So added margin, and let's send that across. So now all our code is back on our GitHub repository, and now we're ready to deploy it. Okay, so the final step now, once we've added Markdown support and we've done all of this, is to perform cloud deployment. And for cloud deployment, we are going to use this platform called Vercel. Vercel is a cloud platform that makes it really easy to deploy Next. In fact, they're also the creators of Next.js, so they make it really easy to deploy Next.js applications. It offers seamless integration with GitHub and allows you to deploy directly in one click. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to go into vercel.com. And you can sign up if you don't have an account already. And then I'm going to click add new project and click project. Now, if you've not connected your GitHub account with Vercel, it will prompt you to connect your GitHub account. It will prompt you to actually give access to your GitHub repository. In my case, I've already given access to the GitHub repository that I'm concerned with, which is Jovian HQ. So I'm just going to click import over here. And okay, so the project name is going to be Jobot, or let's just say Jobot live or something like that, or Jobot dev. And you need to select a root directory. So the root directory we're going to use is called Jobot web. In the repository, we have this folder called Jobot web that contains all the Next.js code, the Next.js project, and it automatically detects that we are using Next.js. So now we can also just set some build and output settings. We don't need them right now. And now we can click deploy. Okay, perfect. So now this is building and this is deploying. So that's good. And while this is deploying, I just again want to remind you, if you have any questions, please leave a comment and definitely hit the like button. And we have these videos we're going to do over the next course of the next 2 weeks. So please subscribe to the channel as well and invite your friends to join. It's good if you can learn this together. If you can invite your coworkers. If you have an idea for an AI powered feature that you can add to your project, please invite others as well who are going to be part of this. Okay, and let us know how you found the tutorial so far as well. Okay, so this is going to take a while to build. It's going to take about a minute or so, but once it is built, it is going to set up like some kind of a serverless environment for you on the cloud, and it is going to serve that website for you from Jobot web or from jobotdev.vercel.app or something like that. Okay, let's see. Yeah, it's almost done. So basically it's just generating a bunch of pages and then it is going to assign a bunch of domains. And let's see. So let's continue to the dashboard here and let us just visit this. So this is now jobot-dev.vercel.app. This is now the deployed website. All right. Now you can see here, if I bring in, and this is now running, this is now my completely fully deployed website. So now you can see here, I can come in here and I can come in and paste my API key right over here. And then I can say, hey, please introduce yourself. And I click send. And it's going to go ahead and introduce itself. And once it does, I can ask it, okay, how to find the largest element in a JavaScript array. And I'm going to click send. And it is going to find that for me, and it's going to print that code for me here as well using the nice Markdown rendering that we already have. Okay, so that's good. I think one thing I would like to put is maybe just give this a title over here. I think that would be nice. And apart from that, I don't really have a lot to add. We are going to add one more bonus feature to it. So just stay tuned. So let's just add that title in here. So I'm just going to say import head from next/head. And I'm just going to set a title for this page right over here. So I am going to come in here and I'm going to say head title Jobot, your friendly neighborhood AI. Okay. And we want to take all of this and put that in here. Yeah, so we have just added this nice head at the top, and that's going to give this page a title, Jobot, your friendly neighborhood AI. And then we have added the div, and of course we have to wrap that in this React fragment. These are just implementation details of React. So let's say add head, and let me commit this, and let me sync it, and that is going to get synced. And here's the nice thing about Vercel. As soon as we push to the main branch, our production deployment gets updated automatically. So that's good. And of course, we can now actually also connect a domain to this. So I can go into settings here, and I can go into domains, and I can add my own domain like jovian.dev over here. And we can also add www.jovian.dev, or actually not jovian.dev. Let's make that jobot.dev. And let's add that in here. And we are also going to redirect www.jobot.dev to it. And once we do that, now we are going to have to add this configuration. And this is where we'll have to head into a DNS provider, something like namecheap.com. And we're going to add that configuration somewhere. Let's see if I actually have. Okay, I'm going to have to sign in, so I'll do this shortly after. But the basic idea is what you're currently seeing on jobot-dev.vercel.app. All you need to do is buy a domain, let's say jobot.dev, which I've already bought. I have here on my Namecheap. I've just logged out right now. And I need to go into the DNS settings. And from the DNS settings, I need to create an A DNS record. And you can see like Namecheap, add an A record. How do you do it? And it's going to show you like screenshot by screenshot. You can go into your domain settings like nctutorial.info. You can click on manage, and then you can go into advanced DNS. Then you can add a new record and select the A as the type for the record, select at, and then select the host or the IP address that you would like to add. So it's just a step-by-step tutorial that you can follow depending on where you bought your domain, Namecheap, Google Domains, wherever. And you can then deploy this not just to jobot-dev.vercel.app, but to whatever domain you want, right? And that is how we've deployed jovian.com as well. It is running on Vercel. So that takes care of cloud deployment. Now here is the last thing I want to cover since we have some time. Instead of waiting for the entire response to be generated, we can stream the message. And for that, we are going to use another package called npm event source parser. So what we can do is as soon as we type, we can just stream the message character by character. So I'm just going to install this helper library over here. So I'm going to go into view, terminal, and let us just install this helper library. This is called event source parser. Okay, let me just put in event source parser here. That's going to install the library. The library is installed. Now we want to import this create parser. So we need to stream the API. We need to add a parser streamer. I'm not going to get into the details, but all we need to change here really is this send request function. So the send request function simply needs to change to using the streaming API. And there's one change that we make here. While calling the API, we provide here stream equals true. And then apart from that, what we get back is not a single JSON response, but we get a stream, and then we can get events from that stream, turn those responses into JSON and grab the content out of it and add it, etc., etc. So I'm just going to copy over this code here. I'm not going to get into this because this is simply not important for us to understand. All we need to know is that there is this send request function that we have improved, and that is going to have a way to automatically stream messages for us. Okay, so I'll just paste it in here and let's see. So just to tell you what it does, it constructs an updated set of messages from the existing messages which are already there and adds the user message. Then it sets the messages to the updated messages. It clears out the user message. Then it tries to make a fetch API request along with the API key. And here we are just passing stream as true. Then from the response body, we get what's called a reader. And then using this reader, and then we create a parser that is going to parse the values from this reader. And then what we do is we simply loop over and over, try to get some value from the reader and check whether the reader is done or not. And if the reader is done, then we exit the loop. Otherwise, we simply feed the text that is obtained from the reader, so the stream text that is obtained, into the parser. And the parser is then going to parse that using the event parser. It is going to check whether the stream is done. If it's not, then it's going to get the data. From the data, it's going to get the choices. And this time it's not a message, but just a delta, which is basically the additional part of the message. And it's going to just add that into the new message. So it's going to keep adding to the variable called new message, and it's going to keep updating the state. Okay. So the details here don't matter. What matters here is if I just reload the page right now, this is again my development page, not the deployed production version. And here I type, who are you? Introduce yourself. And I click send. You will see now, okay, I have not put in the API key. So let me grab the API key and let's just reload this. Yeah. Who are you? Introduce yourself. And let me hit send. And you can see now we have this nice streaming message. So isn't that nice? Now we can ask, create a short, or show me how to find the largest element in a JS array. Okay, let me hit send. And you can see certainly here's a code snippet and So it keeps going. Nice. This is basically ChatGPT at this point, of course, without the history and everything. But we have now created our own Jobot. I think one other thing I'm going to do is, or a couple of exercises for you. Figure out how you can support, when you press enter, how you can support sending the message automatically. Okay, so you'll have to add some kind of a on change handler to the text area. That's going to fix it. Then another thing for you to try to figure out is how can you scroll this automatically as new messages are coming in. Okay, do it using a loop. And let me hit send. And you can see now that this is not scrolling automatically. So again, figure out a way to actually scroll this as the messages are coming in. So I'll leave both of those things as exercises for you. So just a quick summary. Here's what we did. We understood what it takes to build an AI-powered application where a bunch of different APIs. So yeah, a bunch of different APIs. And today we looked at using just the ChatGPT API to impart intelligence and identity to our AI that we are building. And we also saw how to create a web application using Next.js. Now, next time we are going to also create some kind of a sign-in so that you can actually sign in and you can use it. And we're also going to look at using skills. So how we can give Jobot some skills. So we're going to look at that too. All right. And what next? Well, we created a chatbot UI similar to ChatGPT using React, Next.js, and Tailwind CSS. Here is what it looks like, jobot.dev.vercel.app, and we can just deploy that to jobot.dev directly simply by going into the project settings and configuring the domains properly. Then we connected the chatbot UI to the OpenAI API and the stream, and we also learned how to stream messages. Then we deployed a chatbot UI to the cloud using GitHub and Vercel. And the code for this you can find here. I think it's just /Jobot. So I'm just going to change this over here. And the finished site will be deployed here shortly at jobot.dev. So you'll be able to try it out as well. Now, a couple of resources you should definitely check out to learn more about the recent advances in artificial intelligence. One is this paper called Sparks of Artificial General Intelligence. And this is a very readable paper because it does not contain anything that is technically too challenging. All it contains is a bunch of examples that have been put into ChatGPT and the responses that these examples result in. And after reading this paper was when we got inspired to actually go ahead and create this course. So here is an example. For example, you can ask ChatGPT, can you write a proof that there are infinitely many primes with every line that rhymes? Okay, and GPT-4 does a better job of this than GPT-3, which is what we are currently using right now. But all we have to do is we simply have to come in here into our code and change the model type from GPT 3.5 Turbo to GPT-4. But let's try this out. Let's maybe just reload. Let's maybe just ask Jobot over here. Can it explain to us? Can you write a proof that there are infinitely many primes? So yeah, primes are numbers. Well, not really. Yeah, it's not exactly rhyming, but maybe if we use GPT-4, let's try to use GPT-4 over here and let's reload the page. Let's grab our API key and let's paste it in here. Let's grab that prompt again. Can you write a proof that there are infinitely many primes with every line that rhymes? Infinity primes we aim to show using rhymes to make our proof flow. Let's use with the smartest prime we call. Multiply primes we find, then add one we do. Assume a moment that's a prime list finite. Multiply them all, we get a product that's right. Now to find a new prime, here's the gimmick. Add another to the product, a new number we mimic. You can see that each of these is one stanza. Let n be the product plus one we obtain. A prime or composite this number can gain. If a number, etc., etc. This is proof that there are infinitely many primes in a poem, which is just insane. There's also a video associated with this tutorial or with this paper you should check out. It can write plotly graphs, so you can write the code to produce these kind of plots. It can create a unicorn, so it can create SVG code for a unicorn. That is again crazy. It can clear lead code interview questions, and that is how our lead code bot works on jovian.com/jobot. Yeah, lead code assistant. And here you can paste in a question, paste in your code, and it can actually tell you whether your code is right or not, or it can simply explain some code for you. So you have all these things. And there's another article that I would encourage you to check out, which is the phenomenon of emergence. So a lot of these capabilities have emerged in language models that are, as we've added more data and more parameters into them. And that is one of the reasons that it almost doesn't make sense to train your own language models anymore, and maybe even generative AI models in general or neural networks in general. But it makes a lot of sense to just prompt them in the right way, which is what we did today, a very simple prompt. So just prompt them in the right way and then create applications on top of these, which is what we're going to do in our future lessons. Okay, so you can see that this is kind of the probability that in some time, for a while, the performance of the language models remains bad, but then it suddenly starts to shoot up. For example, over here. And this is the change that happens as soon as we cross the $10 billion parameters boundary. Okay, and that's what has been crossed with GPT-3 and 4. Now, the next thing you should check out is these prerequisite tutorials. In case you want to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, this is a quick 30-minute tutorial that gives you the basics. Then you have a React.js tutorial. So watch this 30-minute tutorial to learn the basics of React.js, the basics of Next.js, the basics of Tailwind CSS. All are actually very straightforward. They're designed to make your work easy. And we've been using this flex property here and there. That is where you can check out this tutorial on CSS Flexbox. And here are a bunch more tutorials, optional tutorials. If you want to learn how Markdown works, you don't have to, but it could be something that you might want to just learn. So check out this tutorial. If you want to learn Visual Studio Code, check this out. If you want to learn how to use Git and GitHub, check this out. A quick tutorial of Node.js, Fetch API, the Chrome developer tools, the right-click inspect that we were doing, if you want to learn that. And finally, if you want to learn more about GitHub code spaces, there is this 40-minute tutorial as well. So within a few days, you should be able to pick up the basic skills you require to understand the code that we looked at today, and maybe even build on top of it. And of course, all the code is open for you to see. It's just at jovianhq/jobot, and you can try it out today. Okay, so what to do next? Well, a good idea would be to start chatting with Jobot, just explore its capabilities, come up with potential applications that you might want to build, because over the course of the next few lessons, we're going to build some applications. Follow along with this lesson again and try to code it yourself. Then learn the prerequisites in case there are certain prerequisites you don't already have. If you cannot contain your excitement, just go ahead and learn it over the next 2-3 days. And next, participate in discussions. So one thing you can do on the course page is you can come in here and you can go in and post a discussion right over here. You can see there was a discussion posted, can we add visuals? And the response is that we will add them after episode 8. It will require GPT-4 for parsing visuals, and that API is still not public, but it's going to get added soon. Okay, so that's that. So that was the first episode of how to build an AI, the Jobot Chronicles of Jobot, where we made first contact with Jobot. We have given it an identity, we have given it an interface, a chat interface, and then we're going to build on top of it. And it's going to get pretty crazy from this point as we add all of these interesting capabilities and build out a bunch of interesting applications like you see on jovian.com/jobot. All right, so we're going to add all of these capabilities and much more. We're going to go far beyond this, and you're going to be able to create your own skills as well with it. So that was the first episode of How to Build an AI, the Chronicles of Jobot. Thank you for joining. I hope you enjoyed this session. Please hit the like button. Please share this tutorial with somebody who might find it interesting. The more viewers we get, the more encouraged we feel to actually continue this tutorial series and keep building interesting things. And please share it on social media as well. Of course, if you leave a comment, if you have any questions, leave a comment on the YouTube channel, or you can come onto the lesson page and leave a comment there. We will also try and add some assignments or some toy projects that you can try out. And I will see you in the next episode. So have a good day or good night. Bye.